Once more into the breach, FaZe Clan have finally reached the top of the mountain, the pillar that they have etched their name into alongside G2 Esports, Team Empire, and Team One. They are the 4th overall winner of a 6-major tournament, not counting an invitational. That's obviously its own separate entity that we will keep sacred because it only comes around once a year. But FaZe Clan, I was looking around for my shirt and I finally found it. FaZe Clan are your major champions. We still have one more post show to do. I'm Jacob. He's Jesse. Initial reactions to that best of 5.
Man, that one, that was a long one. We almost approached the record. We got 20 rounds, was it, on Villa? So came pretty darn close, the 22 longest map ever record, but didn't quite get there. After that, we saw a lot of really good games. I'm glad it was a competitive final. I think everybody kind of expected it to be, but there's always that chance that somebody fumbles, somebody chokes, somebody doesn't show up to the grand finals. Both these teams really played their hearts out today. And yeah, FaZe versus NIP. Good grand finals to end off what was really a strong major.
Honestly, a strong year overall. I don't know if we're going to have another game that's really that same level of quality either. We might have maybe 1 or 2 best of 5s here or there before the overall scope of 2021 is over. Like the NA to EU finals, I don't know if those end in a best of 5. That wouldn't shock me if they did. And then SI quals, and SI itself doesn't happen until January and February. So that might have been kind of it for like the best siege that we're going to see for the remainder of this year, or at least things that people take seriously, because some people might just use NA finals as a glorified scrim again. We'll find out. But yeah, I loved that final overall. For me, we were talking about this before I went live. I liked this better than Empire and Team One from Mexico. But you and I have slightly different opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was partly just because, like, you know, I was there and able to like watch it all happen live, whereas for this one, obviously you and I are sitting at home.
Like proximity bias is a thing for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. This one just felt to me like, you know, we had map 1, okay, kind of one-sided. Map 2 was obviously fantastic, but then after that one, I guess for my taste, it kind of dragged on a little bit. Not that it was bad, right? But you know, Mexico for me was just like a huge game, huge moment. I was never drawn out of that grand finals, but again, that's kind of where we're at. But I think it does speak to just how good the majors were this year overall. Both Mexico City and Sweden, I think, delivered very strong tournaments from a viewer perspective. I know, you know, viewer count wasn't amazing for either. I think the quality in both production and games and storylines were fantastic for both of the 2 tournaments, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I loved how this really all came together. I loved obviously like the stage design and we had for Sweden. It definitely had a leg up on Mexico in terms of like really leading into an aesthetic like that, which is something I can totally appreciate. And you're right, production was definitely on point. I felt like, again, everything that we had to worry about talent-wise, given the circumstances, I felt like everyone meshed really well together. Hats off, by the way, to production for actually deciding on a TriCast for the grand finals.
Yeah.
We tested this out for the 2 days that we were in the NAL in the studio when it was Emzo, Blue, and Stokes all together doing a TriCast, and then they pull it out for grand finals where Parker joins Ace and Dez, and there were enough memes that were like, it's Ace and Dez, and Parker's just kind of there as like the neutral middleman, like keeping the 2 of them from killing each other on a grand final cast. I thought that was a nice touch, and I like maybe the TriCast formula is something that we can experiment more, like a little bit more with in the future. That wasn't terrible.
No, I thought it was really good. I think TriCasts and Siege work because there's so much downtime. What you can do in a TriCast, and this isn't necessarily like what they did here, but I think what you could do, like if you wanted to make it a more regular thing going forward, is you can have one guy really dedicated to play-by-play, and then in a lot of the downtime in the earlier rounds, there's a lot of back and forth between those other 2 casters that can really break down the analysis and have that conversation, and the play-by-play can jump in at times as well.
Yeah,
I feel like that's what we had going on in the NAL, where Blue was just like pretty much solely focused on play-by-play, and the other 2, Stokes and Emzo, did a great job breaking it down. But yeah, I think this TriCast went really well. I remember at the start of the day when Parker tweeted like, we got something special, you know, we hyped it up. Immediately somebody posted in my Discord, was like, yo, are they doing a TriCast? I don't know how, but it seemed like they figured it out pretty quick. But you know, regardless, I thought it was a really fun idea. I think in Siege especially, it can work, and I hope we get to see more of that experimented with in Siege. I've actually done a TriCast before, Jacob. I don't know if you know this.
Your TF2 days?
No, in Siege. I did it with
really?
Sternab and somebody. I don't remember who. Sorry
Was
to
it
whoever
like
else
a
that was.
what,
This was like,
was it something you were taking seriously, quote unquote? It wasn't like a
yes,
meme cast for a qual.
it was a serious game. I think it was a serious TriCast of a qual.
Okay.
That we were like, we were doing it pretty seriously, and I was the play-by-play, and I thought it flowed really well then, and yeah, I think going forward it should be a thing.
That's kind of cool. Was that around the time that you were doing like qualcast with Raven at like the beginning of 2020, like around that time, or was it before then?
But this was earlier. This was like,
okay,
I don't know, it's like 2019 era. This is like Paris quals or Raleigh quals or something probably.
gotcha.
Like Paris.
Okay. One,
Yeah.
two. Yeah, I loved how everything really came together. It was a nice crescendo to an event that still kind of had like a lot of question marks around it in terms of how it was going to flow. But we might as well jump into what the overall bracket looked like, because this bad boy turned out mostly how I thought it was going to. I said FaZe was going to win. You said FaZe was going to win. I don't really know how to react to getting one of these correct, because the only time I'd ever gotten an actual champion prediction right was Space Station winning USN 2019. I've never done a major. I've never done an SI. This feels like really weird territory to me, and I don't know if it's a matter of FaZe breaking the curse or I just suck at my job and I can't curse teams anymore.
Well, when did you predict FaZe? Like, did you predict them at the very, very start?
No, I said they were probably going to be... I didn't know if they were going to be first or second seed coming out of their group, but then once we got the bracket, I said they were going to win, and that was when I picked BDS. And then I added the addendum: whoever won the FaZe BDS game was going to win the whole thing. So,
wait, did you pick BDS at the bracket?
No, I picked FaZe in the bracket, but
yeah, that's what I thought.
I was like, but if for some reason they don't win that game, then BDS are going to win the whole thing. So,
right, yeah, that's where my head was at as well, and yeah, I think it's different because like Mexico was this huge upset story, right? It was this underdog team that nobody thought was going to do anything throughout groups, throughout the bracket. I mean, if you were picking every other team other than Team 1, I think those were very reasonable predictions, right? Yeah. Whereas this was like a lot of people, basically all of the analysts were like saying FaZe Clan are the most likely team to walk away with this victory. They were the #1 seed coming into this tournament from Latin America. They dominated their group. They had tough games in the bracket for sure, but I think everybody kind of knew like this was the favorite team. But that didn't make it less exciting. Like FaZe Clan, because I think everybody was kind of rooting for them because they did really deserve this victory. It's been so long. I mean, they've never won it before. It was really nice to see like FaZe Clan be able to come out and like have this run, and it felt like a really good storyline. It's a very different storyline from what we got at Mexico, but nonetheless, like a fantastic one.
I'm very much down for this team in particular winning something substantial, because it holds a bit of a special place to me. The first event where I really knew that I wanted to jump in on like Broadcast Town or esports or finding a way to get involved in Rainbow Six like officially was watching Rio 2018 and watching the G2 and FaZe Clan final matchup that turned into a G2 rout at the end of it, watching a whole bunch of disappointed Brazilian fans leave Rio without the team or the win for their home crowd, right? So watching FaZe Clan has been always really cool. I do kind of wish, like in the back of my head, that like that team was capable of winning something. So the team complete with Ion and Mav and Yuna, that would have been cool, because that was the squad we knew in Brazil for a long time. But the fact that we still got Astro and Cameraman to get their dub is dope. And correct me if I'm wrong, Bullet was also on that the Atlantic City Season 7 winning team for Team Liquid. So I think that technically makes him the only Brazilian player who's ever won 2 premier tournaments in Rainbow Six. I think that's correct, unless like a support staff member's done it.
I suppose. Yeah, let me check that Season 7. Bullet was on that Season 7. Yeah,
Palu, Moringa, Zig, Bullet, and
Silence and Sensei were the 2 support staff of Liquid in that tournament, and they're still the support staff of Liquid. So it would just be Bullet, best Latin American player of all time,
simply by number of event wins. Crazy.
Somewhat debatable, but undebatable. He's nuts, right? Undebatable. Very talented player. As with everybody on this squad, you can't look at a team that just won a major and say anything bad about him, right?
Oh, did I say Palu? Sorry, I probably meant Sexy Cake. I don't know if I meant Palu. That's my bad. But still, Bullet, congratulations on your first. Well, I mean, congratulations to everybody on their first major. But it just goes to show how what they did for their bounce back in stage 3 worked out super well. Didn't have an analyst before, got an analyst, and the biggest thing that gave them overall was the ability to play probably any map. Granted, not
Yeah.
any map well, because I don't think they played Chalet great at any point in this bracket. They played it twice over 2 days and didn't win it either time. They looked really shaky. But still, the maps that they won in this best of 5 were ones that were won, I think it was in like 7-1, 7-3, 7-3 were the maps that they won today. And the only 2 maps that NIP won were ones that went really close, like aside from Chalet's a little bit of a throwaway, but even Villa was super back and forth. And honestly, there could have been a case that NIP probably would have lost us maybe 3-2 or 3-0 if Villa doesn't go their way.
Yeah, and I mean, Chalet looked very bad for NIP at the start, right? It was
true,
only
yeah.
after that, half swap when FaZe got onto defense that things fell apart for them. So, like, yeah, I think definitely FaZe Clan looked strong. I think it's fair to say they looked strong in every match that they played throughout this entire tournament. I mean, unless there's something crazy I'm forgetting, like the one, maybe the one map was that first one against Damwon Chalet. That first one, I think, was probably the most one-sided map they had. But that's it. Like, other than the 7-3 to Damwon, I don't think they had a result worse than, I guess, 7-4 against NIP. They had 1-7-3, 1-7-4, and those were their only game. And then a 7-5. Those were their only losses throughout the entire major. That's nuts.
Yeah, and it was really cool that we had a very balanced game too, because both NIP and FaZe were the ones that had won the most games overall in the group stage. They came in, didn't lose that many in playoff bracket. This one was pretty damn even all the way through. So even if it's FaZe Clan winning, I think we don't get that good of a match if it's not NIP being the opponents that they face. Even if a lot of people were still like saying, "Oh, it's a rematch of Copa Elite, it doesn't really matter." I thought the series was still good. Right. That's got a lot of rewatchability.
Yeah, and like I put it in my tweet, I think FaZe Clan had the hardest like 3 opponents they could have had throughout this entire tournament. Like BDS were the favorites for a lot of people, myself included, coming into this. They beat them in the quarterfinals. Damwon pushed them to the absolute brink. Damwon played amazingly in that matchup and almost made FaZe Clan look like chumps. But FaZe Clan came out on top. And then NIP, you know, again, dominated their group stage, played very well in the bracket. And I think probably, unquestionably were the strongest team on that side of the bracket. So coming out, having a very strong performance there. Even battling back, right? That map deficit. They were on match point, or series point, I should say, for 2 whole maps. And they came back and won it. So well-deserved for sure for FaZe Clan.
So let's go ahead and dive into those maps real quick. Probably not the most in-depth analysis you've ever heard, because this is more like, hey, FaZe Clan like won and it's going to be celebratory and whatnot. But we might as well touch on what we saw in this game to begin with, which was Coastline. Initially, because NIP had already had a pretty good record on this, they had won it twice through their playoff bracket. I was concerned FaZe Clan were going to let this one slip, but this was obviously NIP's first pick. We should mention, by the way, before the series started, the 2 bans that we had were both Clubhouse and Clubhouse and Oregon, which for me, I was pretty happy about, because I'm like, Oregon's kind of a slog to watch. Clubhouse has played over and over the same way consistently, so we got those maps removed, and then every other map, I'm like, yeah, I'm completely fine with how this ban phase went.
Yeah, I agree. I think the map ban phase, we got some fun maps for sure. Clubhouse and Oregon to be kind of slow.
Yeah.
But, you know, speaking of the map ban phase, I think it's definitely notable after this game was over how bleak it was looking for NIP, right? Because the thing about a best of 5, especially when you pick first, NIP got to pick the first map, right? There are 7 maps. It's a wide open pool. There are no bans that happened before that first map pick. So NIP had any map that they wanted. They said, FaZe Clan, you can take them to any map. And they chose Coastline, and they got 7-1. That is a really bad start and a really bad sign, because you assume that, like, now FaZe Clan's going to dominate their map pick as well. Now you're down 2-0 in a best of 5. It's really, really hard to bounce back from that. Obviously, we saw them, you know, that second map didn't exactly go the way that we were expecting. But the fact that FaZe Clan were able to dominate so heavily on a first map pick in a best of 5 from your opponent is incredible. And for me, like, that was where Cyber showed up and was just like, okay, Cyber is not gonna let this one get too close. And
he did not.
He got a 1v4 in round 7. Ridiculous shit. He got, like, I don't know how many kills he got overall, but he got way too many for it to be fair. And that was his playground for real on the first map.
I was worried because this started a trend for probably both teams, but I think I noticed it more for FaZe. First of all, take Mav or take cameraman off of any operator that inquires frag grenades, because that man on round 2 very nearly stopped like the security wall or VIP wall from getting opened up. Like, I'm like, please, if you're going to throw nades, it doesn't work like Battlefield. You've been playing this game for 6 years. I beg of you, understand how frag nades and trajectories work. This isn't CS. Like, come on.
And we like showed that clip yesterday too, for those that were watching the post show, where he threw 2 nades at like a pair of barbed wire and missed both of them.
Yeah.
The group chat after cameraman missed that one, they brought all the memes back.
We're just like, no, stop. We need the X-Kairos to blow up. You can't destroy the X-Kairos. That was my first. It was literally round 2 of a grand final, and he's already pulling out the shenanigans. But no, the trend I noticed was droning was horrendous, and I mean that in like the nicest way possible, because FaZe Clan was winning rounds, but droning just sucked completely and utterly. They were losing probably maybe 7 or 8 drones, or if they had a Twitch, probably like 9 drones within the first minute and a half easy, and then they're just like, well, I guess it's swing country. And that persisted through the series. It wasn't just here, but it made me really worried that we were going to lose FaZe Clan to a complete lack of intel. On a map like Coastline, it's obviously a little bit weird because it's a fragger's paradise, but this turned into team deathmatch and very nearly Call of Duty World League style gameplay after a period, because it wasn't like slow and strategic. FaZe Clan just don't pace themselves that way, but Cyber was still winning. He was like 16-5 this map.
Yeah, I feel like what happened was like the drones were going in, right? And they were clearing certain parts of the map, and then they were getting destroyed. And like that kind of left FaZe Clan almost with like a map of like the map in their minds, right? And then Cyber was able to walk in, and he kind of like, well, I know where some opponents are. I know where we didn't drone, so that means there's probably players where we didn't drone, so I'm just going to pre-fire those and swing on them. And it seemed like the intel was there, although they were really losing a lot of them. That was for sure something I noticed. So yeah, risky for sure, but Cyber, I mean, when he's dropping as many frags as he did that first map, it's hard to complain.
Yeah, it's really weird how this one transpired. I'm happy FaZe won it though, because this was like, ultimately, this might have been the map where NIP had already kind of lost the series, which is a weird thing to say, but it's a map that they didn't select that went so drastically incorrect in terms of what their game plan was and how they were meant to execute it. And Julio couldn't get in the game. He was like, what? He was the MVP overall, or at the very least the MVP of the series in their game against Rogue from yesterday, and he couldn't get started. Like, he was the guy who was playing so far off site that when FaZe decided, yeah, we're just gonna hit this like with a full minute left on the clock, like if they're doing something to hit kitchen, he is upstairs in like theater or luggage or something and can't get back to site fast enough to have any impact. So good on FaZe for reading into this and being like, we're not interested in dealing with any of their roaming bullshit. We're just gonna go and take what's ours. Yeah.
Although it was map 1, this game could have ended on Coastline, which is really scary to think, but it didn't. And that kind of brings us into Villa, right, Jacob? Because this one,
sir.
Oh boy, this was FaZe Clan and NIP fighting to the very end. We got 20 rounds out of this map.
Oh man, we didn't break the record. We didn't even exceed it. We did, like, it was like, this one was a cock tease a little bit, but everyone on, like, all 3 casters were like, please don't give us an overtime or like an infinite overtime game that actually like goes the same distance as G2 NIP or G2 Empire, which I would have been down for ultimately. If map 2 had managed to do that, that would have been sick. But it's a case where I feel more happy that this game didn't drag on, because if it did, it probably would have had even more impact on the maps later on down the road. It was only an 11-9 score. NIP took it. That meant that we had to play all 5 maps ultimately because of how NIP did on the second map, and this is where they were ramping up. The momentum was starting. We were seeing NIP say, "Not today, Satan," and you know, their comeback arc started here, and then it just like dissolved very quickly. But yeah, still hats off to NIP for playing the endurance game on this one.
Yeah, we got what is this? 7 defensive round wins in a row. Yeah, 7 defensive round wins in a row from rounds 12 to 18 before finally NIP sort of broke the back and forth, won an attack in round 19, and then closed it out with their defense in round 20. I think that round, that 19th round where NIP were able to win their final attack, right? That's one that like might be analyzed for a while going forward. And it's so hard, right? Because it's like, some of the analysis you could do on that final round, that second last round, is probably just like, man, FaZe Clan don't need to be swinging that much. the same time, swinging that much is what got FaZe Clan here, right? So I really hate like using that as like a criticism for them because it's worked so well in the past, and sometimes it just comes down to like you're hitting every shot, your opponents are hitting every shot. At some point, somebody's got to crack first, and in that game, it was FaZe.
This is also something Grant pointed out on Twitter after the fact. This was the first ever map, I think, in professional Rainbow Siege, like at a tier 1 level, where everyone had at least 10 kills, because it's not possible I think for everyone to have 10 kills, because you also have to like die every round for that to be a possibility, and like everyone would have to die every round. So because of the infinite overtime extended rules, this is the first time everyone hit double digits, which is kind of a cool marker. But Muzi led the way, which was dope at 19 and 13. He had himself a pretty good game.
Yeah, Muzi was definitely swinging. Again, with how long it went on, those numbers are going to get super inflated, but it was really cool that we did like reach that milestone. The other map that like could have done it would have been Coastline between G2 and Empire, which everybody's going to make this comparison for the rest of time now, because
for
the
a long
two
time
maps that have ever gone past 15 rounds, right? So this is gonna be what people talk about. But in that map, Shepard only had 8 kills and Goga only had 7. So that was one where like the supports were really like holding back a lot more, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But in this one, I think it kind of needed to be 2 Latin American teams to achieve that record, right?
Yeah, Vela was what was interesting because it was phased, and that trend of not droning was interesting. Like their attacks were super aggressive. It was an attacker-sided like regulation, and then a defense-sided overtime, because teams maybe didn't feel like it was necessary to keep on taking those kinds of chances. And it was once that trend of defenses being broken was finally broken, when NIP won an attack round, then won their defense right after, that this game finally came to a conclusion. So the overtime story was who wins an attack first. NIP finally did. That was the way that they were able to win the whole thing, and then took us to one of FaZe Clan's most abysmal performances of the whole tournament on a map that they should not be playing, which I think there is a lot of credence to take FaZe Clan to Chalet, because they don't do very well on it. It's map number 3, and that was what, 7-3, 7-4? 7-4.
That was 7-4, yeah.
I think the scores are switched, but yes.
Yeah, FaZe Clan did not win that map, but did their best, and it looked like they were going to. For the first 4 rounds, they went up 3-1. They started an attack. They had some really good like top control that they were able to convert into a couple of rounds. Some of the nades weren't necessarily landing for in NIP's favor, I guess I should say, for a lot of those rounds, right? And even when the half ended, it was a 4-2 split, and you're looking at FaZe Clan on these attacks, and you're like, okay, I mean, Chalet is attacker-sided, but a 4-2 split is never something you're going to complain about. It looks like FaZe Clan can get a couple more rounds, and they'll be locking this map away, and the series should end shortly after. But they didn't win a single defense, Jacob. Some of the swings were just not there. There were some real interesting things happening with some of these rounds. There was a wine round where like somebody's just charging through the bomb site full blind, and like nobody can shoot him. Like it's kind of nuts.
Was that the Astro Malusi moment? But he's like full blind, and he's like, everyone's like, oh, he's just sprinting through the middle of gunfire, like unabated, but it was because he couldn't see shit.
Yeah, everybody was blind that round. It was kind of a weird one, but that's what we got, right? And in the end, NIP won 5 straight attacking rounds and closed out the map. And yeah, they looked way better on that second half. FaZe Clan just did not show up.
I liked how NIP didn't allow what happened from the previous map to really fatigue them either. I think for both teams, this can be said pretty well, but I did figure... before the show began, I mentioned that NIP are now the only team to have won a game that went to infinite OT and then lost the series outright, because I did question the fatigue factor. Had a game that went in overtime happen in map 2, so I didn't know if that meant the rest of the series was going to be like tainted slightly by that kind of thing, and if it meant that we were seeing like a quality of play decrease over time. Maybe we can touch on that if it happens like on a cafe. Maybe the argument can be made there, but it didn't happen for this map. This was still both teams trying to play into their game plan, but NIP was simply doing it better than FaZe Clan were, and FaZe kind of got desperate once that streak happened from NIP at the end of the game to win the whole thing outright. That was my observation, at least. I didn't know if you had something similar. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, you gotta like go into the what if territory, right? And be like, if FaZe Clan had won that 20 round match in map 2, there's no possible way this goes past 3 maps. Like the mental from NIP would have absolutely chalked. So I think it definitely helps that like it was in map 2 and it made it a 1-1, right? Whereas like you look back to the 2 Empire game and keep making these these comparisons, that was map 1, and so it already feels like, okay, well, you played so much and you lost, and you don't even have a leg to stand on, right? At that point, you can't even fall back and be like, well, at least we won one, right? This one just kind of forced it into a best of 3 where FaZe still knew, like, hey, we're tied now, right? It's not like we've lost the lead. So I do like that their mental was able to come back even after losing 5 rounds in a row to NIP on that map 3. One thing I talked about yesterday was how, and something Astro actually talked about cameraman talked about in the interview, was just like the mental of FaZe Clan looks really, really good. And there were multiple times throughout this tournament, I think the end of Chalet is one of them, where like the mental for a lot of teams would have gotten absolutely destroyed.
Yeah,
they were able to calm down, they were able to talk to their team, and cameraman was able to kind of like take charge and get people back on the same page, whether that meant yelling at them at certain points of some other games, or whether
don't
that
be afraid to
meant
do it,
calming them down. Yeah, I mean, he knew exactly how to lead and how to communicate with the rest of his team, and it paid off, and you saw that in each and every game they played in this playoff bracket.
And he mentioned in the interview as well, when he made the move over to MIBR and he was given more of that leadership position, that enabled him to like grow and evolve more as a player, as somebody who wasn't just going in for frags or whatever his role was prior to the MIBR pickup, which at this point I don't even remember if it was that different. But he comes in here, plays Mav, is doing a lot of the support stuff, but is still allowing comms to flourish in their own right. And even I'd make the argument after that Villa game when they lost Infinite OT, like, it was on Astro's POV, and he's repelled on what is he's repelled on Study Balk, and he looks over at the rest of his teammates and he like laughs, and then he's like, he's in a 1v5, there's no possible way he can win the round, and he like laughs and smirks. Then he gets blasted by someone holding a clash angle all the way from Study Doorway. That's the end of the map, and then they didn't allow this to kind of get them in the gutter either. NIP is definitely more of a team that allows that kind of stuff to get to them, which I think after map 4, it definitely did. This was an issue, not only because FaZe Clan had loved this map before, but NIP, I believe, had also played this in their group. They weren't bad on it by any stretch of the imagination. They played it against IG twice. They very nearly lost to IG in their very first game of the group stage. They still pulled it back to win, but they were getting outclassed. This wasn't a 5-1 half, but it was still really close.
Bank?
I'm trying to remember what the scoreline was.
Bank was a 5-1 half. Bank was a 5-1 half. Yeah. The only round that NIP were able to win was round 4. It was an open area attack. And even that one looked really good for FaZe Clan at the very start with Cyber. That was the round where Cyber jumped out, got a kill, and then hid in the back alley for like a whole minute almost, and wasted the time. Almost like took a 1v1 with the hard breach. I think it was Kamikaze that round with the fuse kit, like almost beat the Thermite. Would have been super detrimental. Thankfully, he lost that gunfight, and NIP were able to recover. But yeah, that was a really rough first half from NIP for sure. It was another one where Cyber definitely like was feeling himself. He had a big flank to start it off in round number 1, continued it on again with that big jump out in round number 4. And yeah, it didn't feel to me like NIP were doing a great job of like getting the kit down. Oftentimes it felt like they were really going for kills, pushing deep into the site, trying to make something happen with their fragging department.
Yeah,
it just was not working. There was a Glass play as well in round number 6. Where they open CEO, they smoke in the breach, the left-hand side if you're standing in square, right? They walk in the breach, but the Glass like never stops moving, so it's like scope thing never charges up, and he never actually gets to see anything, and he just gets blasted by a shotgun, like randomly firing into the smoke, and it's like, all right, guys, if this is your best attempt, then we're going to have some problems. And they ended up trading 2 for 2 on the second half. And that was enough for FaZe Clan to end it out 7-3.
This map is still a roamer's paradise. When it got taken out of comp, I was like, that's like the quality about it that I think I like the most. It's really freaking big, and you can use it for all these corners. And NIP, in some cases, were full sprinting, trying to take roamers out of position after they had gotten a kill. What they would do is, it's not like they were intentionally doing this, but whenever there was an attacker in line with where a roamer was, the roamer would get the kill. That's the bait. Then someone from NIP is trying to execute onto that roamer to kill them, and there's usually like backup there for FaZe at that point. They were doing it consistently. Like that started this map off was, I think it was Souls. He was like top blue. He finds 1 kill, and then Psycho sprints to blue because there's like 13 seconds left. I need to take care of this guy. And then by that point, Souls has someone else with him, probably Astro coming up blue. And that's kind of the end of the round, and it just happens over and over again. It's not something NIP can really account for. This is also a map where NIP were moving very slowly. That like they can be explosive, but again, I'll say what I said back in the group stage. They would be the single greatest team in the world in best of one scenarios if rounds were 3 minutes and 20 seconds and not 3 minutes. Like their time to execute sometimes I felt like was really hurting them in an environment where FaZe were treating these kind of more like death matches. They were pushing the envelope more consistently, and it was working. And FaZe Clan sometimes didn't have the same speed. There wasn't really a way to counter it, and they just fell by the wayside really quickly. That was the problem.
Yeah, this for me felt like the map where we started definitely seeing like the cracks in NIP. Like I do think both teams played this final very well. However, like there were slip ups for FaZe. It obviously happened kind of at the end of Chalet when they had to defend and they just weren't putting up any good holds.
Yeah.
This for me was probably the worst like actual coordination that we saw from NIP, the worst performance they had. Even like Coastline didn't feel like NIP were like doing anything like structurally super wrong. Just felt like Cyber was just like absolutely shitting on them all, you know? Whereas this map was like really, there were some poor takes where like you'd look back and like as a coach, you could say like, okay, NIP, you're doing this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. Like what's going on here? And I'm sure like a lot of it was just the fact that they've been playing for 4 hours at that point and they were dead tired and comms I'm sure weren't fully there. Some of it as well was absolutely just the way FaZe were playing so aggressively on their roams. But structurally, this was kind of the point where I saw NIP making a lot of those like big mistakes. And I was like, okay, it feels like NIP may have lost this and we'd be going to a map 5. And that's what happened, Jacob. We eventually got the cafe.
This was the Cyber show. This was where at Cyber prior to this map starting needed 6 kills to exceed the record set by, who was it that set it? Was it Apollo? It was Palu against TSM at SI this year had set the record. For most kills
are you talking for
obtained
most kills in a series?
Most kills in the series, wasn't it Palu?
It's Nesk and Rexon who had that 49, but those were both in best of 3s. Wasn't Palu. Because we talked about this last time. I'm
no,
it's Nesk and Rexon.
No, you're right. I just thought that because it was SI 2021 for TSM or for Liquid against TSM that it was happening there. Point being, this was where we had a best of 5 scenario, and there was always the potential for somebody to break like an overall kill record at some point, and that's what happened. And in a professional game of Siege, Cyber broke the overall kill record after having only 6 kills that he needed to get prior to Cafe. He didn't just get 6 kills; he ended with like 16 or some shit.
Yeah, this is the first time in competitive Rainbow Six history where a player has gotten more than 50 kills in a match, which is just insane. 56 or 57 and 35 is his final overall score. Just ridiculous from Cyber. I agree. And I said it coming into this that like Cyber is the best player on FaZe Clan. He's going to be the guy that like pops off and is their primary, you know, firepower. And he did exactly that. I mean, he did an amazing job. Absolutely incredible gun skill. And even when he doesn't have a drone in front of him, it's ridiculous how he's able to get all of these kills. The way he like played some of these rounds on Cafe, especially like round 4, guy just straight up it's like a cocktail defense. Walks up white.
He wasn't even Nook. He was Buck.
No, he was playing on Buck. Gets a kill in bathroom. Pushes into piano. Gets another kill. Gets a 3rd kill. And then it's like, it's over because Cyber's just walked in. And you're like, how does he do that? The very next round is the exact same thing. It's a kitchen hold this time. But he walks down the red stairs. Walks right into sight. Nobody contests him. And it's like, okay, NIP are totally like out of this game. Cyber is just going to own it. And while they did fight back in that second half, it looked like maybe we'd see something. FaZe Clan only needed like a couple more rounds, right? And
no, like 2 rounds, yeah. Which it was curious because on the Cyber note, there was also like one of those rounds where NIP looked like they were going to bring things back, where Cyber's hanging out like under red hatch, Sledge destroys the hatch, and then he hits this fadeaway SMG 11 shot like as the Sledge is trying to go and knock out new hatch. I'm like, you absolute baller, you shouldn't be. And then he swung back on the hatch again, and Parker's like, that's arrogance. I'm like, yeah, he shouldn't have done the double swing. You should have gotten the 1 kill and then gotten the fuck out. But still, Cyber got a 16, and he nabbed the record. He set it way higher than I think anyone thought, like double, like a whole 10 kills more or whatever it was, or like 10 or 11 kills more than what the previous record holder was, which is crazy. 50-freaking-7. That number is going to stick there for a while. But the thing about it was, when FaZe Clan finally hit match point, they took a tack timeout, and I'm sitting to myself thinking, I don't know if I like this or if I hate this. I like it because it's an opportunity to like reset the mental. You know, you have 3 chances now. It's 6-3. It's probably a good thing to just kind of like calm the nerves down now that you know that you're on match point, you're about to win a major. Just make sure that you don't like get overzealous. So not a bad idea to take it, but at the same time I'm like, if this doesn't go your way and you lose out on like the next couple of rounds in a row, maybe even if it goes to overtime, your timeout is now gone, because if it went to overtime, it's infinite and there might not be another chance for a player break anywhere else in there. So I thought that when FaZe took it, it was like a double-edged sword. They were trying to stop themselves from being greedy, but were also kind of still being greedy, and like about when they were using it. It was a weird conundrum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's honestly like a really good call from Ramalho, the coach of FaZe Clan, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he was like listening in, and I would guess, obviously we can't really know this, but I would guess he heard something in the comms. He could kind of like, you know, hit him with the vibe check, understand how they're feeling, and
Yeah.
probably knew that like this is a moment where they need a moment to like breathe, they need a moment to think things over. And I really appreciate that he wasn't afraid of calling it there, because there's absolutely another universe where if in that moment they were kind of overanalyzing things, they were getting in their own heads about being on match point here, they start to spiral. He doesn't call the tack timeout, and then he calls it, you know, maybe in overtime or what have you, but at that point it's too late, right? Not that it's likely to have happened. I think this team again has a strong mental, but I really like that he was brave enough to call it at that point and just say, like, I know we're in a strong position, but I see something wrong in the comms. I see something wrong with you know, with their mental. I doubt he called the tack timeout and be like, so what do you guys think about this specific strat? Like, there's no way it was anything other than just sort of a mental reset, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he called it, and with the benefit of hindsight, we can say it was a brilliant play, and without knowing, you know, the exact context of why he called that, without being able to listen to the comms, let alone understand Portuguese, I think it's a safe bet that like he understood what was going on in that squad, and he absolutely made the right decision to call it there.
Yeah, Ramalho had the right idea, and I didn't have to go to the Wikipedia page for FaZe Clan to remember what their coach's name was off the rip, by the way.
Oh,
I remember.
don't worry. I definitely did that too. It's up right now on my screen.
There it is. Ramalho. Good on you, man. That was the one guy that also should have been tagged in FaZe Clan's post about them being champions, by the way. I don't know why you don't tag your coach. Should do that more often, FaZe. No, thank you, FaZe, for finally posting things about your Rainbow 16 on your main account, only, you know, when they were in possibility of winning a major. You still did it. I'm proud of you. It felt good to finally see it again. Did you see that they yoinked James's tweet, by the way, about FaZe Clan's like celebrations? Like when Dev did that whole meme edit about FaZe Clan like not like fist bumping and whatnot properly. FaZe like yoinked that and like put it on their page. I was like, so this is how they're coming back to Rainbow Six socials. I understand.
Actually, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'll assume it's a great post.
No, it was just what was it, like they weren't like fist bumping or handshaking, like they were like leaving people hanging, and Dev had done an edit where it was just like a whole bunch of like oof noises and sound effects and whatnot, and FaZe took that and put it on their own. That was what I meant. Anyway, so we're done talking about grand finals. While we're here, in order to fill for a little bit more time, figured it would be a good idea to go over how we got to this point, because we started this journey on Monday, which feels like 3 weeks ago. It doesn't even feel like it was 1 week ago. It's just something that we kind of had to truck through. But why don't we go and take a look at how groups went first, and then we can kind of do like a brief blurb on how every team performed, more or less, kind of like our overall thoughts, and then we'll wrap things out. So, taking a look at Group A, obviously this was proven to be the best group, because we had 2 teams make it to at least the semifinals in both FaZe Clan and Rogue, and FaZe obviously went on to win the damn thing. Still kind of went as people expected. I didn't have faith after the first day that my prediction about Chiefs managing to get out of this group was going to be correct. Rogue proved me wrong, and I'm very happy that they did. And then OXG just nesting down there too.
Yeah, Group A, I think this was one where we all kind of knew like FaZe Clan should be the favorites going into it, especially after OXG fell out. That battle between Chiefs and Rogue, I wish was a little bit closer. We kind of said like, you know, I said particularly that this was like, oh, easy free group for FaZe Clan. We saw some good stuff from Rogue, especially in the playoffs, that I think definitely turned that narrative around a little bit. We very nearly had FaZe and Rogue in, I mean, not quite, but we almost had these teams right in the grand finals. They both made semis. So this ended up being a very strong group in hindsight. Maybe the bottom of it, not so much. But yeah, this one I think was maybe more lopsided than we gave it credit for at the very start.
Group B, if we just want to very quickly just kind of scroll through these real quick. Group B was one that I was happy that I got one of my APAC predictions correct, or in this case, because the only team that I had making out of Group B ultimately was Sandbox. I didn't think Damwon was going to have a chance to get out of this one just because of the group of death scenario that they were put in. But this was the one that I got right. This is where Team 1 were playing, so I wasn't going to bet against the major champions, and Sandbox got out. Vitality made it close. Vitality won the same number of games in both regulation and overtime, which there actually wasn't an overtime game in this group overall, if I remember right. So it was just 3 normal wins, 3 normal losses for both. Yeah. But Sandbox had the tiebreaker, and Dark Zero was there too.
Dark Zero had a really bad start. They kind of turned up towards the end, but not significantly. I think this is definitely a disappointing tournament for Dark Zero. They don't have the excuse to fall back on either of getting COVID this time, so that sucks. Between Sandbox and Vitality, I agree. This was a very close contest. It's unfortunate the actual matches between Sandbox and Vitality were kind of lopsided. It was a 7-3 for the first game and a 7-1 for the next one. But yeah, that was also a super important battle because the winner of that Sandbox Vitality couple made it to SI and the loser did not. So we'll be seeing Sandbox in 3 months in Montreal. Vitality, on the other hand, will not be attending unless they can win the European Open qualifier.
Also, by the way, there are a couple people who are like, wait a second, there's some teams who are missing on the standings graphic. We're going and like getting that corrected. Don't worry about it. This was something that we wanted to kind of like add in as an afterthought. So if there's like one that isn't totally correct in here, don't worry. We are getting that fixed. Don't worry. Yeah, Group B was nice. It was just kind of a surprise that Vitality ended up keeping things as close as they did. I didn't mind Hunter's opinion on the CGG show when he said that Vitality was probably like had the potential to upset, but I always thought it was too soon. I didn't want to give them too much of a chance to get out, more considering that Sandbox was always a solid squad and Team 1's expectations were kind of written in stone 3 months prior when they won the other majors, so there wasn't a way that I thought Vitality was going to make it out, but that just kind of is what it is. For Group C, as we keep on going down the list, was probably the easiest group overall because it had the greatest point spread. It was 15 points for NIP, 14 for BDS, and then 4 for Sonics and 3 for Invictus. There isn't a greater distance between points anywhere else in this major.
Yeah, I will once again try to make the defense of Sonics that, like, other than day one, I thought they played good Siege in all their matches. Day one, and even day one, like, 7-2 against BDS. I thought that was like a relatively, like, there were some close rounds. The NIP game, not as much.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sonics lost 8-6 to BDS. They lost 7-5 to NIP. I do think Sonics played better than their point score suggests. But I also understand, like, that can only really last for so long, right?
Yeah.
Sonics through 2 majors now have disappointed. I think the first majors they finished where they maybe expected to. This one, I would say you count it as a disappointment because although, like, sure, you're getting close against some really good teams, both NIP and BDS, you're not getting close against them consistently, and you're never beating them, right? And, like, to get to the point where I think Sonics want to be and where I think Sonics could be, you've got to beat these teams, right? It's not enough to be close and closely losing to these squads, right?
Yeah.
So definitely disappointment for them. IG, I think we all agree, played very well despite not having their five players. Big stepped up as a substitute and as a coach, kind of dual wielding those roles, and I thought did a fine job, all things considered. But you're right, like BDS and NIP did kind of run away with this. NIP coming out on top. That was a really fun game of day. It was day 2, right?
Yeah.
The rematch wasn't as intense because there was nothing on the line. But we got some good games.
This is where NIP were still undefeated over BDS at that point, and then BDS won the best of one that didn't mean anything. So now technically they've got a game in the head-to-head, which kind of ruined it. It would have been nice if it was always the perpetual BDS are incapable of getting over this hump sort of thing with NIP, but it wasn't to be. I thought they'd be dope. The group overall was just weird. I didn't have faith as an NAL analyst that the Sonics were going to go anywhere. I thought they were more confident, at least. Some of their matches were closer. It didn't feel like it was nearly as lopsided, and they had a regulation victory as opposed to an overtime win. Do I have that correct? Yeah, so they had 1 win in regulation, and then everything else just kind of felt like it was a landslide, and I'm like, these guys are hotheads. I want them to succeed. I do think in the NAL's context, they're a good team, but the NAL doesn't seem like it's the best proof proving ground for majors, especially if that kind of thing couldn't carry over from there to here. It just kind of felt out of place. Sonics didn't perform to the standards that we'd set. And then, yeah, the point about IG is spot on. And then, oh god, Group D.
Bless you.
Thank you, appreciate it. 12 points for Damwon, 11 points for Space Station, 9 points for Empire, and then Furia was down at the bottom of the table. I would have loved it if Furia could have made it out of Group D by like some absolute miracle, and they might have even had a chance to get like second or first in a group if it was any group aside from this one because of how stacked it was. And Empire had a lot of people sweating on the last day, but it turned out losing those 2 games and getting no points on the first day was already enough to send them into a tailspin, because at no point did they ever vault back up over SSG or Damwon, because Damwon like ran away with the whole thing. So like after the first day, like whatever results were there was set in stone, and they couldn't get back out of it again.
Yeah, Furia for me are in a very similar boat as the Sonics, where like if you just look at the points and even just look at like the match like score lines, maybe it doesn't look like they had a very good major at all. But I think Group D was a very difficult group, and I think Furia played really well in a lot of their games. Not their last game, right, against Empire. That one was a 7-1, and from what I hear, I didn't actually watch that game, but from what I heard, they trolled. But every other game, it seemed like Furia were putting up a really good fight. They had 2 games against SSG that went the distance, 12 rounds. The first one was an overtime win. Second one, they only got 5 out of. They beat Damwon Kia in overtime, which proved themselves to be a very good team throughout this major. I think two lands in a row now, both in Mexico and now in Sweden. Furia have had really difficult tournaments. Although in Mexico they had like a bit of an easier group just due to the fact they only had 2 other opponents in their groups.
Yeah,
they still had a really tough like first round opponent, and I again think that they played quite well given all the circumstances. So Furia are probably going to be slept on once again for SI, and hopefully they'll make it out of groups and have a stronger showing in SI, because they really did get the short end of the stick in this group. Other than them, as we mentioned, Damwon went on to prove themselves as a very strong team, got first in this group. Couple stumbles, right? Not flawless. I think definitely consistency is something that we can't say they have been perfect on throughout the tournament and throughout their career. Yeah. But again, given how young they are, how they come from a region that has never done this good, I'll say it, and I think people have echoed this statement, but Damwon Kia look like the best team APAC has ever produced, and I'm really excited to see them in SI. There's a lot of people I've heard saying that Damwon Kia are their favorite team to win the whole tournament, which is crazy. Mine.
Yeah,
because nobody says that about APAC, Jacob. Nobody, and now we're finally saying it.
I'm excited for the culture change. I'm never gonna be somebody like, you will never catch me dead saying I don't think APAC is gonna do anything, or that I like that. Is it possible to be regionist? Or does that just make me racist because it's a Korean team? I'm very, very happy for these dudes. I'm super stoked. And the cool part about this is we're getting back to a point where APAC teams usually had like 1 team or maybe 2 that had some sort of international standing, but the rest of the region couldn't kind of catch up. For a long time, there was a big stretch where no APAC teams were doing anything of note, and now we're back in the point where Cyclops is in but kind of fell back down again. Sandbox / Cloud9 / Mantis has been in the conversation all year, aside from Stage 2, and Damwon have been in the conversation ever since they figured out what wasn't working in Stage 1, and now they've shot up to like the forefront of everyone's notice in APAC. I'm getting like Norarengo vibes from this team. In some ways, more like they had household names, guys who were super popular like within their home country, and now they're coming internationally and blowing people's socks off. I want more of this. I really, really hope that APAC like doesn't continue just to be the sub-tertiary region, the one that never had like a reason to like root for anyone there because you always knew what was going to happen. The time for APAC to finally win something may be coming around soon. Like, we had literal years of it being nothing but EU and NA, and now LATAM's won. Like, I think, what was the tweet from Sentis? They've quadrupled the number of international tournament wins they've had, or in just the span of the past 6 months. APAC hasn't won a damn international tournament, major, minor, like weird qualifier for some obscure tournament no one's ever heard of. Nothing. So they might have a chance to do that. Hopefully, I'll say right now, they win a major and sometime in the next 9 months. From now up until whatever the August major is next year, they're going to win one of those.
Yeah, I don't think that's a hot take, honestly. They're looking really good. I think for the first time ever, Siege has 4 strong regions. Like Siege has 4 regions that could win any event. I think even back in the Norengo and like Fnatic days, they still looked weaker as a whole as a region. And I don't know if those teams ever really could have popped off and won something, although they did have good results. And yeah, I'm really excited for APAC. And as NA, you know, we're still continuing to struggle a little bit. Somebody pointed out to me, and I didn't realize it until just now or until just today, but with this event, Latin America officially has more international wins than North America in S tier tournaments. So
that's sobering.
NA's number 2 is definitely over now. There's no way around
number
it.
3. Oh Christ.
And honestly, let's be real. NA right now with the way they're playing number 4. Not a far off number 4. I'll stand my ground on that. But yeah, I think NA is the weakest region. Not by a lot though.
If APAC is a C or a C minus kind of thing, as an overall idea for a region, I think that's pretty fair to say.
Sure.
All right. Last thing before we go, and we talk about Jesse's tournament or the stuff that he's been running in his Discord server that we've been talking about all week long. Let's do a lightning round. Just talk about every team starting from the bottom. We're working from the overall Liquipedia listing, so the image you'll note is in Discord for Jesse and myself. We'll start with the teams that were in 13th and 16th, but we'll begin with Furia, and we will work our way out the list. Just do like one short blurb about how we thought every team did so far through this tournament. So we'll whip the graphics up, and we'll talk about each team individually. So we begin at the bottom with Furia. They just got slated with a bad group. They got a bad draw, and this is something they had a really unenviable task, I think, of just being a team that was trying to keep their head above water, where Empire were suffocating them. Damwon were the team that kind of came out of nowhere and blew people's expectations completely clean. And then Space Station, they had some good games against Space Station. It was a 7-5 and an 8-7, both of which went at the same map. And I like the rivalry that they're forming against Space Station overall. So I kind of hope like if they meet in the playoff bracket at some point in best of 3s, I would love to see what they can do, because they've only ever played SSG in best of 1s, but not a great time overall. They had 2 overtime wins, and that was kind of it. So hopefully they come back in SI stronger.
Do you want to give letter grades? I know that's something we talked about behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Letter grades.
Yeah, we could do that. What would you give Furia?
I think Furia get like a solid C, which maybe they could deserve something a little bit higher, but they did get 4 points, right? Furia were a team that did get a very hard draw. I think Fantasy was and continues to be the main story when it comes to Furia. Some games he popped off and he looked unbeatable. Some games he was silent. And although you can't judge a team just by one player, for Furia, you almost can. I think they're the one team that sticks out of my mind as the most dependent on one individual player at a top level, right, at this major. And Furia, unfortunately, just weren't consistent enough to be able to win out these games. So, yeah, not a bad performance. I'm excited for them at SI, but I think this is still a disappointment.
I'll give him a C minus, I think, more because they weren't capable of stacking up in what was a very tough and tested group. I'd give him a C or maybe even a B minus if their results were better, or if those wins were regulation and not overtime. It just kind of felt like they couldn't really push themselves over the finish line, so to speak. So I'll give him a C minus. And chat, let us know what your letter grades are as well. Get in here if you have any specific opinion about a team and you wanna like rank these guys on like a tier list, so to speak. If you want to give Furia a rating, go ahead and do that. But we will move on, and we'll touch on Invictus Gaming right after, because of the 2 teams that were handicapped by not having their full 5-stack play and having to play with coaches instead, Invictus was the better of the 2. For some people that may not be saying much, but it was a player who, like a coach who plays Rainbow Six at least semi-consistently, was holding his own in a flex role because they were having to fill for a flex player. It wasn't completely like disrupting the team dynamic, and it felt like Invictus had a handle on what they were trying to adapt into without having Asterix there. Honestly, the letter grade's a little bit difficult, like in spite of that, but I C plus honestly seems like better. I was more impressed by them, even though they won less games than Furia. I like a C plus to a C is still where I'd want to put them.
Okay, we might have different thoughts on this one. I'm gonna give Gig particularly like a B plus.
Yeah.
Fuck it, I'll give Gig an A. Right, I think he stepped up, filled in the sub role really phenomenally. He had a great tournament. Right, the team as a whole, I think I'm gonna give him a D plus. I think that although they did, they were hampered by not having their full roster, it felt like, and they said it themselves, a lot of the mistakes they were making weren't because of like not having their 5 guys, right? It was more fundamental issues. It was more them struggling with their, with their pushes and with some of their plays. I felt like they were kind of like repetitive in a lot of the takes they were trying to run. Like they just didn't have a fundamentally strong way of how to play certain maps, including like Bank, which they played a lot. So for me, I wasn't super happy with IG. I do love the guys on Invictus.
Yeah.
I do think Hysterics is nutty, ridiculously talented, but this just feels like a team to me that is consistently underwhelmed. And I don't feel like we can just say, yeah, but well, they're an APAC, so you can't expect that much of them. After we've seen the other APAC teams do so incredibly well in Sandbox and Damwon Kia, and even like Cyclops in certain like tournaments, I think have done considerably better than I've ever seen from IG. So I think this is still a disappointing tournament, and I want to see more from this squad. I really do.
I can't not call it a disappointment either. Did they make SI out of curiosity, or
Nope,
am I?
Not yet. They got to play quals.
Dude, they're about to be a qual demon team. Like,
we'll see. They got to face like Cyclops in there still.
Cyclops
in there.
Knights are in there.
Wolves, Knights, yeah.
Guts are in there still. Oh yeah, it won't be an easy road, but I'll be. They got in to Mexico like kind of by the skin of their teeth almost. So I'd be curious to see if that also happens over the span of the qualifiers. All right, moving up the list, we got to talk about Dark Zero. This was technically the worst performing NA team because they were the only North American squad to get last in their group. For me, this is a straight D. Like, I didn't see very many redeeming qualities about their play. They had some role changes to me that were very confusing. I wasn't particularly impressed with a lot of their play calling on attack, especially like who was meant to be playing what. Seemed like it wasn't consistent with what they were doing in the NAL, and it's something that they did back at SI as well. Even though the roster doesn't look entirely the same, Dark Zero went with some role changes when the tournament began that had me confused, which is like, maybe you were saving an idea and you were playing something different in scrims in the way that you were playing a normal NAL stage out, but it still kind of felt like you're debuting something literally brand new on a major stage, but you haven't even really figured out how your team itself is supposed to operate. I felt like it was kind of premature for them to really like flex around on roles nearly that hard, and I think it kind of proved that it's not going to work. It didn't really work that well in the NAL, and if it doesn't work in the NAL super effectively, then it definitely won't work internationally, so I'll give them a D.
Dark Zero for me are just like such a complicated team because I'm giving them an F. It's the only F I'm going to give out during this.
Ooh, and you had them getting out of groups to start with.
Yeah, because I had high expectations for this team. But at the same time, I'm going to spend most of this rant like defending the role changes, right? Because they played this in the NAL and it looked fine. Like they played fairly solidly in the last week of the NAL with these role changes and it looked good. But that makes it all the worse for you to bring the same roles now to the major and to play so poorly on them. It really felt like there was something like mismatch going on here. I think that the younger guys, obviously, like NJR and why am I blanking on his name? Pambazoo. We're not having the greatest of tournaments, and I think that was partly due to the roles that they were on. For DZ, I really felt like they could have like come up and had a better tournament than they did. They kind of panicked on defense, especially on that final day. They were scrambling in a lot of their pushes. They were so slow. They were so hesitant. It just didn't feel like they had any confidence in themselves. And that was really sad because I had a lot of hope for this team. I really thought they were going to be the dark horse. This was going to be the major that they surprised people, but they did not. And for the role changes, fine in theory, obviously in practice, didn't show up the way you wanted it to. But it is what it is, and that's an F for me, dog.
That's the only F we're going to give out, man. So I hate to think about what you're going to talk about for OXG, who, sorry, I said that there was only one team that got bottom place in their group. OXG was obviously the other one. And for me, there wasn't any innovation coming from OXG, specifically when they had to play with a coach, and their situation obviously like hit them in the face even harder. Like the circumstances surrounding why they weren't able to play with their full 5 stack is something that they had less time to prepare for than Invictus did when they had to have Gig step in. But when Hopes came in and played for OXG, there was nothing going here, kind of at all. It was attacks were non-existent virtually, which I hate because now I have to factor out this major from their attacking stats just because it's not a representation of what they're actually capable of performing. But on defense, it was like Laxing go kill, Vertigo go kill. There wasn't really that much of a game plan overall, and I'm giving them a D-. I'm not giving them an F solely because they beat Rogue that one time in groups. That's the only reason I'm not giving them like a full-on straight F. And the reason is because Rogue managed to go to a semifinal. There was enough about that team where I do think that this win for OXG is just kind of like, yay, we did something. That's really good. But the effort that they had to put in to get that victory, I do think, even if it wasn't according to OXG's overall game plan, is still something like to be celebrated a little bit, which is like the only bright spot of an entire week for OXG, because they were mauling and being really sad about the whole situation on Twitter, which, to be fair, I would have been if I was them. But yeah, D- for me.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why Dark Zero are my only F is because for auction and esports, I'm giving them an NA or a withdrawal. If you're going to university and you take a course for like a couple weeks, but then you like drop out of that course,
on your transcript.
That's a W. This is a W. This is what this is, and I don't mean as a win for auction esports. Like, they literally didn't show up and like play Siege, right? Like, Hopes stepping in for Fox A was just such a massive issue for them. And it didn't just affect Fox, right? Like, you saw it in Kino and Yaga both struggling, particularly Kino being trapped in his room. I'm sure was not a fun experience. And they didn't play like themselves at all. I don't think anything in this major is representative of what OXG were able to do. If we were to sit here and just like bash them for 20 minutes over like playing poorly against FaZe Clan, like, I don't know, dude, it just feels like a waste of time.
Yeah.
Should they have tried? You know, should they have been like IG and gave it their best shot and played crazy? Maybe, yeah, but like, I'm not gonna sit here and just be like, you know, why didn't you run around and play to your heart's content? I do think some of them did. Like, I think Laxing tried his best that whole major.
Yeah.
But like, when you're stuck inside of a hotel room, when everything is just going so shit for you in a land like this, I'm not one to hold it against them. I think it is what it is, and they'll be back for SI.
All right, moving up above them, the teams that were third place in the group overall, starting in the group of death again. This is Empire. This is weird. This is one of the first times at a premier event, with the exception of SI 2020, the Team Empire has failed to make it to a playoff bracket, which a lot of people, I think, maybe didn't have them getting out of the group of death in Mexico because that was where TSM were playing. But then everyone's like, well, okay, TSM can't play at full strength, so yeah, of course they're going to get out. But it's not to say that like the only time that they can't do well in a group is when they don't have a super competitive one. I do still feel like they kept this one close, but it's that first day performance. I wish I knew what the really big hurdle for them was, because they didn't get a single point. They were 2 regulation losses, which ended up being like the death knell for them, and they didn't have a bounce back. And I like, is it like just getting acclimated to Sweden? Like, it's not that far away from Russia. I didn't know if it was that big of a deal. Like, tell me what the issue was, and then maybe it'll make more sense. But to me, I'm just kind of disappointed that Empire couldn't keep that kind of roll going. And, you know, runners up from one major to group staged in the other just doesn't seem like the kind of like the progression that we should see from a team that's been this notable.
Yeah, I feel like Empire are just like the most forgettable team for me after this major. Like, at least all the other teams that finished worse than Empire are like, you know, there's a big moment that stands out in my mind, like, about them. Like, I could talk about them for a while. I don't know what to say about Empire. Like, I felt like a lot of their games were very like based on like momentum and swings and stuff. Like,
yeah,
their game against Furia on Villa, they go down 4-0 and then they pull back every single round to like end up with a dominant victory. Their game against SSG, what was it, on day 1, has like 2 ridiculous clutches from both Vault and Rampy to start things off, and then Empire just like never get going off of that. You know, their other games just didn't really seem like they were super standout in my mind. So yeah, for Empire, I guess I'll give them just like a basic C-, because I don't really know what else to say about this team. Mentally, it felt like they were getting clutched against. They were getting very streaky. Some rounds they were there, and they would win like 6 in a row, and sometimes they would choke out for like 5 in a row. And so yeah, this is a team to me that just kind of was disappointing, and I hope we see them better at SI, because they were not main characters, at least for me, this major.
Do not play Oregon, or at the very least, do not play Oregon in the same way that you did against Damwon, because that was atrocious. So figure out different maps to play on. But then again, Empire's map pool being an issue for them is like saying the sun is hot. Moving from them, we get into the Sonics, which I kind of already touched on, like how they're a very confident group of guys, and I do have high expectations for them simply because of where their NAL standing is. But only 1 win, and the only reason they were able to like stay in it, so to speak, and technically had a chance to make it out of groups, was because they forced BDS to overtime on Coastline on day 2, like in their 4th overall match, and that was probably like the highlight, other than getting their other victory. But it's still like you had IG in your group who was handicapped and you still lost to IG. Like there's not necessarily an excuse for that kind of thing. You came into Mexico with a learner's mentality, and it didn't really seem as though that kind of mentality really changed that much, or like I would have expected there to be some sort of difference in results, but it still kind of felt like they were looking to play on comfortable maps. Where they did, they got schooled, and nothing was really different. Like for me, Sonics just kind of stagnated from one major to the next. So for me, I'd probably say, C minus.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with the C minus. Like for Sonics, I think the expectations were just a lot higher than what they got. Again, I think they played some really good games this major. But like you didn't show up to play good matches and lose close games against BDS. You showed up to beat BDS, right? I think Sonics, for my mind, should have been neck and neck with the second place team in this group to like make it out, and they got 4 points. Like, if your goal was to like play some good games against some top teams, like they did that in Mexico. They beat Team 1, right? Like they were able to hang with CAG and to an extent with BDS, maybe not so much in that group, but like I think Sonics had like some close games in Mexico. There's no way the expectation was let's have some close games in Sweden, right? The advancement for me isn't there. They came up, they needed to win those games, and they didn't. So C minus again. I have hopes. I feel like I'm saying this for every team, but I do have hopes for this team for SI, and it is true because like for a lot of these teams that ended up finishing third, there's potential there, right? There's a good team somewhere in that roster. Like there's a good squad, just didn't show up to Sweden.
And the one above them in Group B, which was Team Vitality, dude, they were close. This was genuinely the closest that we could have had any team come to like upsetting like any of the predictions that I had. But they won the same amount of games as Sandbox did and were just a tiebreaker away from qualifying for quarterfinals. Because I think, what did they do? They were 1-1 against Dark Zero. That was probably the thing that like would have cinched it. If they had beaten Dark Zero twice and not let them the second time that they played like slip away from them that hard, because it was a 7-1.
7-1.
Yeah. So if that doesn't happen, then Vitality technically goes to quarterfinals instead of Sandbox. Because of that tiebreaker, though, Sandbox does instead sets up the all-Korean semi or quarterfinal matchup against Damwon. I can't say I dislike this team. I thought it was good for the first time the Vitality banner has done anything at an international tournament in 2 years. Like a major banner in 3. It took a long time for them to finally get back to this stage. And a lot of people were asking the question, oh, what it like Kavana was a better team overall in EUL. What if they got to the major instead? I think Kavana would have done worse, mostly because their like LAN experience is something that those guys just have considerably less of. BBU's got longevity. This team has been grinding for a long time to figure out how they're supposed to adapt to the rest of the league moving around them. And moving back to an all-French core was something that was way better than trying to play internationally with a super team that had Fabian and Goga on it. So what they're doing is working. And I thought they just made a couple of mistakes here. Maybe they even win a quarterfinal matchup if they just don't throw that last game to DZ. So yeah, I thought Vitality did really good kind of in spite of the circumstances, and I hope that if they manage to make something like SI or the major in May, whatever thing they compete in next, I hope these guys win something.
Yeah, Vitality are like almost similar to Empire for me, where like a lot of their games felt kind of like momentum based and streaky. Like when they beat Team 1, they were down 5-1 at the half and then won 6 rounds in a row to win that game. When they played Dark Zero, like they just actually didn't play that game. They felt like they were totally absent, right? So Vitality, like maybe kind of make me want to feel like I want to put them where I put Empire, but I'm gonna put them a little bit higher. I think I'm gonna give them like a solid. I'm gonna give them a C+ because I really like. First of all, I love Bibu. I think Bibu played a fantastic tournament. He had some of my favorite plays through the entire group stage. He's a super clutch guy, and I think he did show up today or this week in the major. And secondly is because when they were on those hot streaks, I really felt like they were doing a lot of things right. Like their drone work in that Team 1 game where they ended up winning was really, really solid. They were doing a fantastic job clearing those roamers, and it's not an easy thing to do, clearing Team 1 on the roam game. Like, I think Vitality did show a lot of strengths in this group stage where I didn't really see the same thing coming out from Empire. Maybe I just watched the wrong games. Obviously, we both didn't watch every single group stage match. That would have been impossible.
Would have been too much.
Yeah, but I like Vitality. I'll give them a C+. And like every team, I guess I'm excited to see them at Actually, no, I'm not excited to see them at SI. They're not going unless they can win that open qual, which is gonna be tough.
Yeah, they have Cavanna and then the most of the rest of the European field to go up against. So yeah, the chances don't necessarily look super high. I do agree on like the C plus point. B is something that I kind of want to save for teams that at the very least made semis, and then I guess S can theoretically also come into play for some teams if we wanted to go there.
We'll
All
see.
right, last one that did not end up making playoffs was Chiefs, and I had them getting out, but only because I didn't expect Rogue to do anything, and I am kind of happy that Rogue proved me wrong. Chiefs didn't really impress me that much. Like, if they had been in any other group, they probably would have ended up being in last place, and this just nothing here was really engaging. The only wins that they had were against a handicapped OXG in a group like if you're in a group that has OXG and that's the only team that you're able to beat, that's kind of a problem. And the one time they went to overtime was the very first game they played against Rogue, and they weren't able to close out a bank game that they probably should have won. And like I think Dev mentioned was probably one of his favorite best of ones in the whole tournament, though I do happen to believe for some reason he's biased just a wee bit. Game was good, but it still meant that there wasn't any leg for Chiefs to stand on. They couldn't get momentum underneath them. If they had gotten a win against a serious opponent, I think, especially if they had won that Rogue game, they would have put like a lot of people on notice. Even if it was only 2 points, that would have been super substantial. Didn't get it. And the rest of the time I saw them play, the games are either kind of landslides or just didn't really seem like they were that impressive. It wasn't the same Chiefs that we saw play from what I saw in the APAC playoffs for any reason. It wasn't like they either play structured or aggro. It's like they're kind of just playing scrappy, doing whatever it takes to win rounds, and sometimes it just doesn't look that smooth. So I wasn't super impressed by Chiefs. I'd give them like a C minus.
Yeah, like I want to give this team an F, not because I dislike the players, but because from watching them play, I just felt like they played so poorly this major, especially as you just said, compared to how they played in the APAC playoffs. And I don't like to do like results based like ratings or whatever. Like I like to base it on the actual gameplay that I'm seeing, but I'm basically just keeping them out of F because the games I didn't watch, they were able to get some some points on the board, beating out Oxygen, and what did they push somebody over or beat out Oxygen twice, right? Yeah, beating out Oxygen twice and then pushing Rogue to overtime. Only watched one of those 3 games, so fine, I'm not going to give them an F, but in the matches I watched, Chiefs were throwing away advantages. They were not playing well on attack. Their attack was like where I really was like expecting them to do well. It's what I thought they excelled at with their drone work and their pushing in the APAC playoffs. And then, they would just run at sight with no intel. They would throw the diffuser all alone into a terrible position and it would get down. And it's just like Chiefs for me really were not playing like I saw them play in the APAC playoffs. So it is partly that just disappointment factor for me. Worthy was like definitely their best player. But even Worthy just like had some plays that I felt were really, really poor, were very much a case of like being over aggressive and just being out of position. So while he had some great plays, I thought he also had some poor plays. And so for me, Chiefs are probably the worst. I mean, Chiefs played a worse game, I think, than any team at this major that played with 5 players.
Yeah, it's difficult to dispute that. I think they're definitely the worst out of the 9th through 12th place teams. They eke out with another $5,000 because Fox they couldn't play, so that's cool. But Chiefs are more of a project, and something about the way that they played almost kind of makes me wonder if we would have said the same thing about Knights if they had been able to go to Mexico. But
I wonder.
They are 2 different teams. I'm not going to speculate if both of them would have been the exact same. It's just something that came up in the back of my head. Quarterfinal teams. Why don't we start with we could go in like the order in which they win out, but that might be a little bit too confusing. But we can at the very least start with Sandbox, who they're the only APAC team I predicted to get out. I'm very happy that they did. These guys 100% deserve the additional prize money that they get from the effort that they put into this tournament overall. Didn't allow a really bad slump in stage 2 and their org dropping them to get the better of them mentally. Stuck in the game. Played Coastline like 3 times and ended up like not really finding that much they were like 2-1 on it, I think, over the course of the group stage, then lost it to Damwon in their quarterfinal game, like pretty badly too. It was like 7-1. But still, I'm really proud of these guys. I'm never not going to root for them ever since hearing the story or their origin story from Mantis FPS about all of them working at the same McDonald's at the same time. Like, Sandbox always have my heart. I'm super stoked for the boys, and this is just a good precursor to show that maybe they can do something similar to this at the Invitational or at a different major, because they had a pretty decent group and still survived.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Sandbox played a very good tournament, especially when they were on, right? Like, I think Sandbox had a couple, like, there were some teams that we've talked about that, like, were kind of streaky. Like, maybe they were good at sometimes, at some points, bad at other points. But, like, Sandbox were pretty, like, were good at a lot of their points. They looked very good when they were on. Particularly that first game against Damwon, although they lost it in overtime, I thought they played phenomenally. There's some really creative pushes with, like, glads and, like, rushes and, like, I think they really made some bad operators look quite good in that game. And even like in that first half, they had some strong swings. They just weren't ending up on top on some of those gunfights on defense. So, I think Sandbox are a very good team. They ran out of gas, undoubtedly, that second match against Damwon. And I think even earlier on, it took them a little while to get going. That first day of groups for me wasn't the most impressive showing, and I was very worried about them ahead of time. But I agree. I think Sandbox has made a new fan in me. I was very impressed. I'm gonna give him a B, I think.
Yeah, kind of a B minus for me, I think, just because of how they let that last or the quarterfinal slip away from them on
Fair.
Coastline. It was just like, it's their pick. Like, you've gone to it a couple of times, but maybe even like the map selection kind of helps bring my grade down like ever so slightly. But still, that's still damn good from a Sandbox team that I don't think a lot of people were thinking like would qualify at all. But then like the group came in and we're just like, yep, they're getting out. So good job to the boys. Moving into BDS. Damn it.
Yeah.
Should have been first out of the group. Should have had a different matchup than facing FaZe Clan overall, though they did lose in the semifinals to the eventual tournament favorites, so maybe it's not like all the like
yeah.
I'm cracking it up to be, but still. Semifinals and 1 round away from making grand finals in Mexico to getting knocked out in quarterfinals without winning a single map to FaZe Clan is still kind of a big deal. And I'm looking at this wondering if this is going to be like a trend yet again for a team like BDS that, yeah, having a coach in there is obviously something that's going to mess up some of the back end work a little bit, but it's not the same effect as replacing an entire player on the team, because the team is still going to perform all of their duties the same way that they were before a coach came in, and they were undefeated in the EUL because BIOS was with them for like all of stage 3 but didn't get announced until like midway through the stage or something ridiculous. So I don't like this as a BDS like fanboy, as somebody who was turned into a BDS fan because of the meme that spawned from almost 2 years ago. I'm concerned for like on their behalf that this might be something that ends up like bringing them down for a couple of months, if not like totally spiral. And I don't want them to. I'd love this core to end up winning something because they've been so close. The sad reality is the furthest this team has ever made it at an international tournament was where they were. They went on their really deep lower bracket run back when RX was on the team instead of Brede, and I don't want that to be this team's legacy.
Yeah, BDS were my pick before the tournament started for the team that was going to end up winning, and obviously they didn't attain that. I'm going to give them a C plus, I think, which seems kind of low. Like they did play well, but again, I think their expectations were very high. The group stage is really what brings it down. Like they probably could have gotten a B if they had like a really strong group stage, but like lost the way they did in the quarters. But their group stage was like losing to NIP that one game, or the first game in, I think, was a game that they should have been able to win. I don't see NIP. Wow. At the time, I didn't see NIP as a team that like at least should be dominating BDS, right? 7-4.
Yeah.
I want to see BDS do a lot more in that game. Not that NIP are weak, but just that BDS should be stronger than that. And even in some of their other games, like BDS against Sonics, I don't think played amazing Siege. Like I think BDS were slipping up more than I expected from them. Because again, for me, this was the best team in the world going into this major. They weren't able to prove that. In fact, they proved that it wasn't true by how they ended up playing, and it was just unfortunate. When they got into the quarters again against FaZe, there were good moments, right? It wasn't a total dumpster fire or anything. They got to 15 rounds in that second map, but with the way they played in that first map and with how some of those other rounds went on Chalet, it's disappointing. Strong opponent, I get that. But for me, I expect BDS to beat strong opponents. And so that's why for me, it's a C+.
Always the bridesmaids, never the bride.
Yeah.
Regrettable for BDS, but hopefully they'll get there at some point. I'll give them like a C, I don't know, a C+. C++ maybe, just because they'd crack into B if it wasn't for how poorly that quarterfinal went overall. Team 1, dude, come on, you can't keep playing with my emotions like this. They were a team that still, again, has not been together for a considerable amount of time, won the Mexico Major off of a total Cinderella story, and were still probably one of the better teams, I think, that we looked at overall for this tournament. When we looked at the bracket, I said there's no way they don't make Grands, because they're going to beat Rogue, who didn't look like they were that good. And if you put the two of them side by side, I still kind of think that Team One at the minute, pound for pound, is a better team. They just had a bad series, but they should have gone further than they did, and I'm disappointed that they didn't. Their group stage looked great, and I do think they probably had a pretty even group, like especially with Sandbox and Vitality fighting for that second spot. They confirmed that they would be the number one seed in their group pretty early on, so they didn't have to play their last couple of games seriously, but it still looked strong. They didn't have nearly the same amount of questions that we had about them. If you'll remember back to when they had to get a tiebreaker game to even make the playoffs in the first place, that wasn't a problem for them here, yet they still went out earlier than expected.
Yeah, I see chat wanted to give Team One like C minus, or like I see chats in the D's, and I want to give them that too, because that game against Rogue was so frustrating, because we've seen Team One play so much better, and they didn't bring a single IQ that entire 15 round of Cafe. I really don't want to give Team One a great grade because of how they played that quarterfinal. That said, they played a really good group stage, and I was really impressed with how they were playing for the majority of this tournament. Maybe this is a hot take. I'm going to give them a B, I think. B minus, I'll go with, because I really do think they played strong siege at the start of this tournament. And there were moments, despite how frustrating the bad moments might have been in that quarterfinals against Rogue, there were moments where Team One looked like a really good team. Levy, I think, had some crazy clutches that were going on against Rogue. I felt like they were doing pretty decently on Oregon, the least to start off. 2 attacking rounds to start off that game was a great start until they threw it away. So Team One, I do still think, are a strong team, but yeah, as far as the results go, very disappointing. Losing to Rogue should not have happened. I'll stand by that.
Yep.
But it happened, and so B minus for me.
I'll stick with the B minus. Probably would have given them something a little bit higher if they had like even won a map in their freaking quarterfinal. I probably would have given them something more, but in good conscience, I can't give them anything higher than a B minus, I think, at this point. And then the last team that was in the quarterfinals that didn't make it anywhere else was Space Station, and this one, other than hurting my soul as probably one of my favorite teams overall, or my favorite org, is probably Space Station. I freaking love the guys over there. This is just a tough pill to swallow, not only because the series against NIP in the quarterfinals wasn't necessarily, it didn't swing their way. They had a really good group. I will say that outright. They beat Empire twice, even though Empire looked as though they were struggling. They understood what to fix when they lost to Furia, and they went back and beat Furia by a bigger margin than Furia beat them when they played them the second time around. And then when they played against like Damwon, that's where it was definitely more up in the air, because they played the same map twice and they lost the same map twice and didn't make nearly as many adaptations to their game plan as Damwon did. Still, I can't really knock Space Station too much. It's just like, this is the last bastion of NA hope internationally, as far as we can tell, simply based upon regional play. And the way that they played in groups was nice, and then they got to that quarterfinal, and my hopes just fell apart because they were losing people over and over again. Playing in an NA structured style makes me wonder that if we end up losing one player over the course of a round, I'm immediately now asking myself the question, have we already lost the round? Is there the chance that we can even come back? Space Station have clutch players on it, don't get me wrong, but is that enough substantial evidence that they're capable of doing anything else until NA as a region itself gets strengthened? I have no idea.
Yeah, I really don't know what I want to give SSG. I think that they kind of got through groups with a lot of kind of shaky play for sure. They had to rely on a good number of clutches and ridiculous plays. And having ridiculous plays doesn't automatically make a team bad, right? In fact, I think it makes a team good, We do sometimes say that having a high clutch stat is not a desirable position to be in, because that means you're putting yourselves in the clutches.
Right.
But SSG were getting a lot of those sick rounds, and you can't deny that there's some insane mechanical individual play on SSG that was making that happen. But it just didn't feel like that was always there from a team perspective, right? It felt particularly in that quarterfinal matchup against NIP, they would lose a couple of players and make it impossible for them to hold any map control. They'd get flanked on coastline. Hot and Cold really dragged SSG to the finish line, and even then, of course, round 14 wasn't enough to pull it out for Space Station. So maybe I'll just default back to a B- for the squad. It feels like they didn't play badly, but again, it's SSG. I'm expecting them to win, right? I'm expecting them to make semis, to put up really strong performances. They had tough opponents for sure, and they had some good moments, especially individually. But this is a team that I have very high expectations for, and they definitely did not meet those.
I'll give it a B, mostly because I do think that is a pretty good like representation of their score, and they had a much easier time in Sweden than they did in Mexico trying to adapt their NAL formula to something that could work outside of just playing NA teams. Like it was way better here, and that might have been partially the Skies factor, that might have been the role swap that they made for stage 3. Everything they did just felt like it clicked more in Sweden, and it's clicking more and more with every event. So like by that standard, hopefully then that means they can actually win a playoff game at some point in 2022, because they didn't win a single playoff game for any of the 3 tournaments that they played in 2021. But we'll hold out hope and see if SSG's trend just keeps on going up, because it is going up. It's just very, very slow, I think, at this point. Damwon, first team to get knocked out yesterday, and this is an opinion I don't know how many people are going to share with me, but because this game against FaZe Clan, one was against FaZe, who won the whole tournament, and also came down essentially to a coin flip about who was going to have attacking or defending side on Oregon defense, because it went to a map 3. I'm giving them an S tier, because they were 1 round away. They were 2 pixels away from making it past FaZe Clan, and they were also the winners of the group of death. Not enough good things to say about this team. Their weaknesses overall aren't things that I think are completely insurmountable. My worry is that they may be read into now easier by other teams, because they've kind of made their presence felt, and everyone's kind of like, maybe we should look at what Damwon's doing and see what works and what doesn't. I'm giving them S tier. If they were that close to being able to qualify, and it wasn't even like that abysmal, regardless of what their map pool is, I'll give them an S tier, because good God, I love this team so much after this event.
I don't think I'm gonna give out an S tier in this tournament. I think that like an S tier for me would be somebody that just like, a team that just like totally dominate and like was actually perfect. I think every single team at this event made some mistakes, had some bad maps.
Sure.
But with that said, Damwon came pretty damn close to being S tier for me for being perfect. I'm giving them A+. But yeah, Damwon played fantastic, and I think anybody not giving this team credit is very foolish at this point. They played so damn well against FaZe Clan. The fact that they came out on Chalet and were just like, fuck it, we're going to run out at you every single round, and we're going to go to spawn peaks. And they did it so well. Like, that was what you had to do against the tournament favorites, to start off that game so strongly. And they did it, and they did it like perfectly. They were hitting every single shot. They looked confident in all of their gunfights against FaZe Clan. They finally, I think, gave APAC the representation that the region deserved. Like, they looked so strong. I loved what I saw from Damwon Kia this week. And yeah, you know, if Rin had just like been a couple pixels lower with this shot, I believe it was, they're in the grand finals. And let's be real, they're probably beating NIP. So, man, for me, Damwon Kia are a really exciting team. This is a squad that I think is a great shot of winning Invite, let alone placing top 4, going to the finals, or whatever you want to say. And even their group stage, like, they played a fantastic group stage as well. They started like 7-3ing Empire, then they beat Furia, then they beat SSG. They went 3-0 to start it off. Yes, their only loss, they had 2 losses. One was the 7-2 to Empire, which I don't know what was happening there. They weren't shooting back on coastline. The other one was like an 8-6 to Furia, which again, I don't exactly know what was going on there. But regardless, like, nobody picked this team to get first out of this group.
Nope.
Some people had them getting out of this group. Nobody had them first. I had them 4th, right? I was sleeping on them. I have not been giving APAC the credit they deserve. That's on me, because Damwon Kia absolutely showed up this tournament. A+, no doubt.
Call us a wake-up call. And for APAC's sake, I'm very happy that if you had to attach your hopes and dreams to one team above all else to finally get your region out of the pit, I'm happy that it's Damwon, because, dude, I'm on the train now. Like, I literally went and tried to see if there was any merch that I could buy off the Damwon store, but it's all in won. It's all in Korean, so I don't know if I want to.
It's also
if I want to give my card a charge there, I'll have to see if they have a US representative and give us both sweatpants or some shit.
The biggest problem with Damwon Kia is they just won Worlds, so all their merch is sold out. This is the problem. This is the issue.
But they didn't win Worlds though.
Didn't they?
No.
Oh no, they almost won World. They got the semifinals of Worlds.
They were runners up this time. Yeah,
they should have won Worlds.
They should have. I was hoping that they would do it 2 years in a row, but they couldn't. They were second place to Edward Gaming, the Chinese. All right, but Rogue though, Rogue fucking shocked everybody. This was the biggest surprise for me, was how far this team was going to go. Not just because of the land curse, because the land curse really only followed aces all the way from the Lestream esports days until now. So there's not really much to say about like how that transpired. It's just that the curse is now dead. So congratulations. I'm just proud of the boys. Nothing else says we understand exactly what our issues look like better than their progression from the beginning of 2021 until now. Adding Meepa to this team, adding Leon to this team, understanding Karjeka wasn't going to work out, adding Prano, all of those different things have led up to this moment. And they got a semifinal appearance, didn't do really good in that semifinal, which I don't even blame them for, because their primary objective was get to the 6th Invitational. And they did that when they won their quarterfinal game over Team 1. So this, for me, is a pretty easy A. Mostly I'm baking in the surprise factor into that as well. If it was like, oh, Rogue is usually like a super strong team, I'd probably give them like a B for how they played, but because this was rather unexpected, I'll give them an A. Easy.
I don't think this is easy at all. Again, like this,
no?
I feel like Rogue played so poorly in some of their games, and I just think that this team,
it was poor in some, but the others were great. Like it was kind of on off.
But like, were they like, what if Team 1, what if Alamau just gone to IQ, right? Does this team stand any goddamn chance of getting as far as they did? I don't know, Jacob.
So now I understand why your watch party was talking about nothing but IQ nades for an entire map today.
Yes, I mean, listen, Rogue are a team that, like, through all the gameplay I watched from them, this team shouldn't have done anything. But they did. They made it all the way to motherfucking semis. And that, like, that makes it so difficult for me to rate them, because I just don't think they played that good of a game. Yet somehow they made it work, and somehow they got as far as they did. I'm just gonna give them, like, a B+. Fuck it, you know. They absolutely destroyed my expectations. They played fine in groups. Again, I thought they were very all over the place. Some of their later games, like their matches against Oxygen, were just disasters. Their matches against Chiefs even were not fantastic. But then they beat FaZe Clan on day 2. They were the first team, one of only 3 teams to take a map off FaZe. It was Rogue, Dam1, and NIP.
Yeah.
Like 2 of those teams are the best, are in the top 3 of this tournament next to FaZe, right? So like, I don't even know, dude. We'll stick with what did I say, B+?
Mm-hmm.
But god damn it, Rogue. Just be more normal. Be a team I can understand and analyze.
Yeah, let's
don't like it.
I part of me wishes that they didn't make it this far. Because then we'd have more games that we could then watch when they played SI quals to kind of get like a better idea of what they were going to look like heading into SI. But now we just have the major games to look at to be like, this is the current form of this team. What the hell does that mean for their SI chances, kind of thing. I don't know if they're going to be this consistent all the time. I'm happy that they got this result, but it's still it's like on the nose. I'll stick with my A, mostly just still due to the fact that I didn't think they'd get this far. So congrats to them, but still I don't know how long this kind of thing is going to last for. Second place, the winners, the current world champions, getting knocked out by a team that they've been facing so often in Brazilian competition as a part of the Big 3. NIP, who had a disastrous, absolutely abysmal Mexico performance, then bounced back, win almost every game, had a chance to go undefeated when they played in groups, but then lost their last game to BDS. So there still hasn't been an undefeated team in groups so far for any event this year. NIP came super close. So I think their group stage performance was still relatively solid, even though I do think it was still kind of an easy group because Sonics and IG seemed pretty toothless in comparison. And then they went to playoffs and had a relatively easy bracket. So it's weird to figure out where to place them. I will give them probably like an A- or a B+, simply due to they made it all the way to grand finals. They showed a lot of tenacity, especially in the infinite overtime game and the one that they won right after, to ensure that their mental didn't tank, and then they ran out of gas like after map 3 was done and just couldn't continue.
We're very opposite minds about these last couple teams, Jacob, because like for me, this is the easy A team. Like NIP dominated their group. They beat out NIP. I think that was a or not, they are NIP. They beat out BDS, a team that I think they should have lost to. I think a team that like I didn't think they could take out. And NIP, like based on their performance, if LATAM had like a reasonable tournament structure, wouldn't have even been at this tournament, right?
That's true.
I don't think they had very high expectations at all. They slammed their group. They played really well in their playoff bracket through both the quarters and the semis. Did they have some easy opponents? Sure, maybe to an extent. Like they had Rogue and they had an SSG that like easy is not the right word for either Rogue or SSG for everything I've said about Rogue. Easy is not the right word, but like NIP walked in both of those games, I think, as the favorites. And they won both of them. But I thought they played very well to get to the grand finals. And when they got to the finals, there were some damn good plays in those finals against FaZe Clan. That second map, Villa, being able to go 20 rounds and still clutching it up when you already knew that if you win this, you're not one map away like FaZe Clan would have been. You're still 2 whole maps away from being able to shut down that series. The fact that they were still able to play well for the majority of Chalet, well, all of Chalet, the fact that they started off and had some decent rounds in those last 2 as well. I think NIP played a really good tournament. They were never the favorites going into that grand finals, and they shouldn't feel too bad about themselves for losing to a FaZe Clan that just looked unbeatable this entire tournament. Yeah, this is an easy A. No way in hell I'm giving Rogue an A if NIP aren't getting an A.
I mean, hey, to each their own, which is fair. And I do think that for me, like, if they had managed to get the victory in the finals, I probably would have maybe even given NIP an S tier, mostly because that's how they played back at SI, and it would have been like a consistent trend. If they're on, then they're on, and there really isn't anything that can stop this NIP team overall. But I do think it's like their group wasn't really that difficult because 2 teams didn't even get like above 5 points, which is kind of a rarity, especially for how groups have typically gone in major competition. But still, good for NIP. They got here. I agree with you. They shouldn't feel super terrible about it. But the problem is, when you get to a grand final and you lose a grand final, it's probably worse than getting group staged. And I think that was something that we could say about Evil Geniuses for as many times as it happened to them when they were an Oregon team in Rainbow Six. Because the team that they lost to is going to be the one that gets all the glory, walks away with a bigger share of the prize pool, and maybe even has some SI seating in there as well. They got a major trophy. For the first time since FaZe Clan has had a team in Rainbow Six, they have won an international tournament, a major, a minor, it does not matter. FaZe Clan finally at the very top of some standing. Like, these boys did it, and I'm super happy because I've been rooting for Cameraman and Astro to do something literally for 3 years.
Yeah, FaZe Clan, this is an easy A+ for me. Again,
Agreed.
I don't feel like this is a tournament where I'm going to be giving out S's, but yeah, FaZe Clan played so well. I mean, we all kind of expected it. So like, to an extent, right? Like we all kind of knew FaZe Clan were going to do well this tournament. I think after watching groups, everybody kind of understood that FaZe Clan were like the favorites to win it all. At least that was the prevailing opinion, right? And they delivered on that like promise, right? Everybody kind of thought they were going to show up and they were going to play well, and they did that. You can't punish them for people having high expectations to go into this. Some struggles for sure, but I don't think like their struggles were due to them doing poorly, at least not for the most part, right? Like when they were pushed all that way against Damwon Kia, Damwon played a really good game. That wasn't FaZe throwing to get to that point by any stretch of the imagination. And in that, I mean, even in the quarterfinals, you know, BDS, I still think are a really strong opponent who played some of those rounds really, really well. Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah.
And FaZe were able to bounce back and play so dominantly. Some maps again against NIP, they smashed them. That coastline game for sure. The way it ended, I think, was a very much a statement from them. But some moments had mistakes, right? They didn't play perfect on Chalet. They didn't play perfect throughout every game of their groups. They did lose one here and there. And there were moments where they definitely looked beatable, right? But ultimately, throughout this whole tournament, FaZe Clan met every expectation, and for some of us, totally exceeded them. So, well done to FaZe. They played their game. They played fantastically while doing it. Every time things got tough, they stood up to it. They bounced back. Their mental never was able to falter. And yeah, easy A+. Fantastic tournament.
From Santos Dexterity to Team Font to FaZe Clan to Cameraman being on MIBR, that was probably the biggest heist in Rainbow Six history because it pulled over the good parts of MIBR over to FaZe Clan, reunited them with Astro, and it turns into their first major victory in the history of a tournament or the org's involvement in Rainbow Six history. So, that being said, we're kind of done. So before I roll credits, Jesse, how'd that competition end up?
Well, Jacob, for those who don't know, we had a prediction competition going out through the entire week. We had daily prizes going out as well as a grand prize. The daily prize is just given to one random person who gets everything correct or who gets the most number of games correct. Congratulations, P2, for getting the grand finals correct and being randomly selected for winning the Valkyrie esports skin. I'll be in your DMs in a little bit. But obviously right now, the main thing to hype up and to talk about is the overall champion. And if you're in the Discord and reading the messages, you already know who it is. It is going to be Ashluz, who got, what was it, total score of 51, which is really, really good. The maximum possible score theoretically would be 71. And that's with playoffs being a little bit higher weighted than those group stage games. So congratulations. I think he's already said Ashley wants to go for a FaZe Clan jersey, which I think is pretty fitting. We'll get all that sorted out. I'll be in his DMs. But I also want to say thank you to anybody who participated. We had 182 people coming in and participating in predictions. Was a lot of fun. We gave out some good prizes. The watch parties as well were going on through the entire Discord. And they were really fun for the community to be able to interact and all that. So I'm gonna spam my Discord one more time. There's nothing else for people to come in and join, but there'll always be future majors, right? And it's a good place to come talk about Siege. It's like a better subreddit. It's like a better Caliber Jacob Discord. That's all it is.
Jesse, you're not even in my Discord. You left a while ago. You
Wait,
need to come back. Yeah, what the hell? Why'd you leave?
I think I left because it was notification spam, but I like notification spam the fuck out of my Discord.
So I was gonna say, you know what? Here, I'll spam my Discord link a couple times. So you know
Fair
what?
enough.
Here, this
I'm
one's
gonna join
me.
your Discord.
Yeah, and then so everyone jump in there if you haven't jumped in my Discord, but then also join Jesse's because Jesse has been doing a really good job, especially like with the watch parties as well. That was something I was thinking of doing, but he was in there, he was suffering through all of the people that came in with really bad takes and opinions and whatnot, which I respect because that was kind of a hellscape when we've done it before. So go and join both of those if for some reason you have not done that previous to now. Would love to have you both in here, and Jesse gets the verified tag. There you are, sir. Woo! Yeah, I love having a verified role. It makes you blue. If you're not verified on Twitter and you're somebody who's like prominent in the community, join my Discord and I'll verify you. Easy clap. It's the easiest process in the world. Well, okay. Anything else you want to say before I wrap us up? Because this is it. This is the end of a week's worth of very hard work in destroying our sleep schedules.
Yeah, I think nothing big, Jacob. Thanks for having me on the post show once again. Thought it was a lot of fun. Continued over from SI, and I'm sure there will be more in the future. Shout out to everybody that worked on the post show. Obviously, you guys looked at Jacob and my faces for the majority of it, but there were a ton of people behind the scenes.
To make you go through that.
That's tough. Apologies, but there were a ton of people that worked on it behind the scenes. Jacob, I'll trust you to run down the list more thoroughly than I could. But shout out to the producers, the graphic designers, to Crater, whatever the hell he did, because it was a great show, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
Yeah, I'll run through these last credits. Obviously, this is something that Jesse and I put together because if we're not at an event for some reason, we still wanted to find some way to give back to the community, to contribute something, whether it be like our analysis, like some general thoughts. I do think it's nice because Siege doesn't really have that many podcast opportunities, so it's nice to be able to still contribute something to the space, even if we're not on an official talent listing for some reason. So I think after two renditions of this, if there's another event that goes on that we're not on the talent roster for, I don't mind bringing this back. This is honestly a lot of fun. We were probably going to be up like watching these matches anyway, so it's helpful to still be able to like do something, feel like there's a purpose, and not just kind of like watch the games kind of going, yay, majors on, that's sweet. So this for us is honestly a really cool project to be able to invest our time in, but this doesn't happen without those of you who've decided to come in, watch us, join the conversation, whether it's live as we record these on Twitch or afterwards when the VOD gets posted to YouTube. Genuinely means the world to both of us to have that kind of reaction. And also special thank you to Liquipedia for also putting the post show in there as like official like media coverage, so to speak. They put it under like a post show banner. They haven't updated it for like a couple of days, so I need to like yell at them to be like, hey, if you're updating this, like do the rest of them. But that was a nice nod. It means a lot to have this kind of stuff be recognized, even if it's not official. So thank you guys very much for tuning in and supporting the show as it's been here. If for some reason you subscribed, I apologize. I don't know why you did that. At some point maybe
Spam
I'll
your
stream
Twitch Primes.
Yeah,
right now.
But
Twitch
no,
Primes.
no.
Spam them. First off, thank you, Caliber Jacob.
Don't do it now because I won't be able to read him out or thank him on stream. We'll get to it later. Thank you very much for tuning in for the post show. Obviously, the people who have worked on the show in the background. Candor for doing collaboration again for the second straight post show in a row, for working on the graphics package. Crater for being the one to take that graphics package and turn it into something that is workable in a vMix context so that we can work with it on stream. And for producing on Tuesday. And the biggest shout out in the world, if I can get a TY Tango in chat one final time for Tango Mango Down, who I hit up after we had done, or I did the post show or one of the recaps in Challenger League with Seed Apps, Cookies, and Links, talking about Challenger League and whatnot. And then he offered his time for the 5 days he was available this week to go and not only produce the show, but also make any of the other crazy adjustments that I had that I figured would be worthwhile to add into the runtime. So TY Tango in chat, if you wouldn't mind, because the contributions that this man has put in over, I don't know how long it's taken him to do it, has been incredibly substantial, and we would not have been able to get the show off the ground or consistent without his contributions. So thank you very much. And once again, that's kind of all I've got to say. So thank you for being here for the 6 major post show. We'll be back at some point whenever we have another major that we're not working for some reason, but maybe there's even a possibility to add a post-show element into some other live event at some point down the road. We don't know. We're just going to be here. We'll keep the post-show going for as long as it's feasible for the two of us. And for the final time, for the 6th Sweden major, I'm Jacob. He's Jesse. We'll see you at some point down the road. Have a good night.